Hello, this is Snehal Tambulwadikar. I'm an art historian currently working with Saljeja School of Arts, Mumbai in the Department of Art History and Aesthetics. In this module, we are going to discuss about pop art, op art and the minimalism movements which happened in the mid-20th century in America. The three movements of pop, op and minimal art became active and known in the 1960s in America though their sources come from different parts of the world. These styles in art seem completely different from each other, but all are the outcomes of the same issues faced by the youth in the mid-20th century. Significantly, all the three, especially pop art and minimal art, are progressive continuation of Dadaism. In the terms of usage of ready-made objects, anti-aesthetics employed by the artist and the flamboyant way of displaying their works of art. In all of these, artists do not aim to create visually pleasing, beautiful objects. They in fact were a living statements of the events that happened in the contemporary that would make people think. The medium thus used was very much known and accustomed to the public eye. This led to extreme popularity of these isms such that we find these styles adopted in music, fashion, apparel, in structures of interiors, in pubs and lot of interior designs in the buildings even today. All of these are essentially diverse from the preceding abstract expressionist, which had just been very popular in the American art scenario. They all believe that the work of art is conceived in the mind and the artwork is only an objective presentation of these conceptions, unlike the abstractionists who were more concerned with the process of art rather than what was conceived in the mind. As you can see in this image, pop art represents the culture which the youth is very fascinated by. The flamboyant lifestyle which breaks all the prescribed rules of the society, living in pubs, drinking, smoking, enjoying music, basically doing everything that which would not have been accepted in the social circles of any city living. The term pop is the short for popular, first used by the British critic Laurence Alloway in 1954 to label a work of art created by mass in advertisements and so on. This term was extended for practice of artists who use the same popular image in the context of fine arts. The works of these artists are thus similar looking to advertisements, magazine covers, comics, collage of photographs and so on. The culture was widely accepted by the youth and it is thus sometimes pretty difficult to fathom whether art inspired the culture or the culture inspired the art. Pop art idolized icons like Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley and rendered the music which is today popularly known as pop music. Also became popular the loud makeups, the leather apparel, luminous colors, polka dots, flamboyant lifestyle and free culture amongst youth that was showcased in the nightclubs and discotheques. These styles are adopted even today where masses would be present and the youth would like to show their rebellion. The first recognized work that can be termed as a work of pop art is said to be Richard Hamilton's Just What Is It That Makes Today's Homes So Different, So Appealing, made in 1956 in Britain. This work is a collage of cutouts from magazines of advertisements, popular icons for alluring the public to a certain superficial lifestyle which is unreal but extremely attractive. In this portrait, the man is ideal, having perfect six packs, holding a badminton racket showcasing his high class and bourgeois lifestyle. The woman too is almost like a doll seated on a sofa, looking very presentable to the eyes of the men who are looking at her. This explains a lot about the movement and its style. Pop art takes a lot of elements from Dadaism, which was an anti-art movement, making art that would shock and surprise, a question to the spectator than an object of pleasure. When talking of pop art, one cannot discuss an art movement. It is more an event which breaks all the boundaries, which seems to have little with what we call art. That might be a prime reason why it flourished in the eclecticism of cities like New York and London rather than the art towns like Florence and Paris. Pop art, or the popular lifestyle that this ism is talking about, is especially centered in the large cities like New York, where you have huge brands, malls, cinema theaters and advertisements which are trying to sell goods to people hardly of any use to them. General public, in order to imitate a certain bourgeois class, have a particular status which is extremely objectified, get attracted to this kind of a lifestyle and start living a very superficial life which is far away from the realities of the world. Pop art here tries to make a statement about such a lifestyle, the current trends of the contemporary society, about the superficiality of living in the world after the world wars and the economic competitions. Pop art depicts the rising capitalism, consumer environment and mentality, where use and social existence are superior choices and ugliness becomes beauty. The artists here are going against sarcastically making the use of this superficial imagery itself to comment on the opposition of it. The art is a strong comment on how American life then was more for others to witness than for people to live. The acceptance of the fast food chains, the mall cultures, cold drinks, living like the models in them, such that the life itself would seem perfect from outside when the person living it or showcasing himself or herself like a doll would be completely repressed from his inside. The artists thus make use of all these popular media like comics, commercials, popular film stars, famous products at their times like the Coca-Cola or the Brillo boxes or the burger chains. The imagery here is to make a deep impact positively or negatively and thus makes use of vibrant neon colors, large sizes of sheer quantity by repetition, and it's different for each artist and each work. To say simply, the style of pop art is to have no style at all. As Dada, they did not really create anything, rather chose from what was already existing around and placed them in known spaces with changed context. As the method of working of the pop artist was very unconventional, pop art was an underground movement for almost the first 5 years of its beginning, approximately between 1956 to 1961. Because of its casualness, brashness, detachment to the apparent issues of the society, and the free-flowing lifestyle attached to it, pop art was not taken seriously and criticized as unscholarly. But as realized later, most of the artists, especially from the Britain pop, were researchers, scholars and avid writers. The artist that we shall begin with is Andy Warhol. As you can see in these 4 images, this is Andy Warhol himself, which is depicted in different ways. Firstly, dressed as a girl. Secondly, dressed as a high-class model who might be popularly shown in advertisement. Thirdly, as a completely flamboyant character who seems to be gay. And lastly, as a completely drunk and smoked up guy in might be a place like discotheque. Andy Warhol is one of the most infamously famous, the most puzzling and the most enigmatic of the pop painters. His art, as his personality, is built upon extremities of experiences and ideas so obtuse to each other that they shock us. He has produced rather mass-produced works of art using the most advanced technologies of his times. He once said, "The reason I am painting this way is because I want to be a machine. Whatever I do and do machine-like is because it's what I want to do in the first place. I think it would be terrific if everybody was alike." These ideas might be the reason why he chose the most popular of the people, the images and objects that already had an appeal amongst the masses, and repeated them over and over again. Through his works or through his ideas, where he says that he wishes everybody should look alike, he basically is trying to create a satire to the life of human being, where each person wants to imitate the status of another and wants to be like other, leaving away his or her own personality. In the modern era of 1950s and 60s, the European and American crowds were very fascinated by the living of the film stars, the living of the pop stars. Films like James Bond were very, very popular, and people completely imitated these fancy icons in their hairstyles, clothings. Most of the pop artists are trying to question this attitude of people as to why they should leave how they originally look and try to be somebody else. Warhol exhibited not just art but his attitude, that of consumerization, of complete detachment to the idea of beauty, the idea of ownership, human relations, in short, all that had come to the world as a byproduct of capitalism and industrial revolution. Fashion was what everybody wore, lifestyle was what everybody had, eat and live was all that everybody wanted to do. In adherence to the concept of consumerization, Warhol paints objects which are very popular in the supermarkets, like his two very popular works, one of the Brillo boxes and the other that of Campbell's soups. Similar to the popular mall supermarket culture we have today that Warhol depicts, the humans want to be clones of the class statement that their existence makes. He expressed in his works the complete detachment by not going through the process of creation at all. No involvement in the work of art. He could produce one, he could produce many, he could produce more, same or even better. He thus did not limit his mediums to painting alone when produced in prints, music, underground movies, clothes and what not. Andy Warhol had a studio called as The Factory, which was a hip hangout for artistic type, the amphetamine, that is the car fanatics, and the Warhol superstars. Warhol used silkscreen so that he could mass produce images, the way corporations mass produced consumer goods. To increase production, he attracted a menage of adult film performers, drug queens, socialites, drug addicts, musicians and freethinkers came known as the Warhol superstars to help him. The art workers helped him create his paintings, starred in his films and created atmosphere for which the Factory became legendary. These are some of the posters in which you see the working of Factory. Warhol not just used the popular but made it more popular by making it standard. He took forward the idea of ready-mades to an extent such that Campbell's soup can was signed and became a work of art. He embraced all that was popular, he became like everybody else, and to such an extent that it made him unique. Robert Rauschenberg, another artist from pop art, is rather different in his approach and was the part of pop movement only at the early phase of his career. He is very well known for his combines which he did in 1950s, which you can see here, in which non-traditional materials and objects were employed in an innovative combination. In this work, you will see the detail of one of his combines where he has used a found cloth, a mat which might have been used to put on the floor in the room, and splashes of color over it. When you look at it from a distance, it looks like an work of abstract expressionist. When you come closer, you see that it follows the concepts of pop art, making use of the reuse. In this work, one can see all that is around us and never looked at it beyond the object of utility. Such kind of objects are used in his works to create images of extreme attractions and pleasure. It could be a mop, a newspaper, a waste cardboard, tires, or anything else that could be lying around our house in the form of garbage. When you look at Rauschenberg's works like The Canyon, done in 1959, or Monogram, which was done again in 1959, his approach sometimes seems like that of the Neo-Dadaist, a label that he shared with the painter Jasper Johns. Rauschenberg was quoted as saying that he wanted to work in the gap between art and life, suggesting that he questioned the distinction between art objects and the everyday objects. His single work had numerous images which seemed to the viewer as quotations, illustrations, jargon of information amidst dabs of paint, which could make no sense or abstract sense in particular minds. The things or the real objects or the stenciled images in his works could be viewed beneath the flow of colors. It is not chaotic like the abstract expressionist would paint, but rather seems to be planned to be random. Characteristically, as you can see in the works like the tap, the collage or piece, Rauschenberg chooses his imagery from already existing processed images, and not a living girl but a pin-up in a magazine, not an actual tin but the tin in the colored advertisement or poster as seen in the collages above. These images give him the liberty to process, since they are not real people or objects anyways. He can possess them, he can own them, since they are not owned by anybody in particular and thus are owned by everybody. In 1961, Rauschenberg was invited to participate in an exhibition at Gallery Iris Klurt, where artists were asked to create and display the portrait of the owner, Iris Klurt. Rauschenberg's submission consisted of a telegram sent to the gallery declaring that this is a portrait of Iris Klurt if I say so. Roy Lichtenstein's work defined the basic premise of pop art through the parody or an sarcastic approach. His work was heavily influenced by both popular advertising and the comic book style. Not as remarkable as and flamboyant as other pop artists like Andy Warhol or Rauschenberg, his works involve all the problems raised by the pop movement and are direct depictions of culture as adopted by the society. He made obvious use of comic strip style blown into large-scale prints, exhibiting them in exaggerated emotions and actions as happening in the society. Lichtenstein tackled his subjects of art the way in which the mass media portrayed them, every human experience showcased as a spectacle. His most celebrated image is unarguably Wham, adopted from a comic book panel drawn by Russ Heath in 1962 issue of the DC Comics All-American Men of War. As you can see in the work, a bomb blast has been made into a spectacle and shown in comics, which had become very popular in that period in America. The use of comics seems to be a playful satire on how real-life instances become stories and entertainment for others. His works may not be classic examples of aesthetical experience but are significant reflections to the social superficiality. The name op has been generally used since 1964. The word op comes from optical, that is eye. This movement has artworks that created visual illusions, but not like Thorpe Lowell, as you can see in the first image, where objects are painted to confuse existence or create three-dimensional space, but rather to bring about doubt to the normal process of seeing, like you can see in the other image. This is an abstract, formal and essentially art based on sensory experience of the human being. Op art is not exactly like pop or minimal art, yet follows them as a style which did not adhere to the beauty of prescribed notions of pleasure. The only concerns of the artist in this movement was to create sensory stimulations through vision. It could be seen as a trend that had been influenced by ideas in Bauhaus, the Institute of Art and Crafts which had developed in Germany, and those of Moholy Nagy and Joseph Albers around 1955 to 60. Bauhaus spoke of art that would stimulate our five senses, our sensory organs, in simple understanding the physical experience of a work of art that would reach the brain. The art thus is pure illusion that creates doubt in our own experience of visions. Op art is purely geometry, a range of lines, horizontal, vertical or curved, spheres, squares arranged in repetition and in manner such that the three-dimensional space is felt in a flat surface. Inspired by Bauhaus, the op artist observed simplicity in form and in color. Thus, many artists worked in black and white with a single geometric element. The artworks thus are elegant compositions through illusions, not crowded and cluttered or worked up to edges. Coined in America, op art was first referred to in print in the Time magazine in the edition of October 1964 and 2 months later was featured in Life. By 1965, op art was a household phrase referring both in England and America to black and white, boldly patterned fabrics, window displays and general utilitarian objects. A unique aspect of op art is that it simultaneously arrived in high art as well as popular. The first of the leading artists in optical arts or op art is Joseph Albers. Joseph Albers and his thoughts have had an important influence on the development of this style, especially in France and Italy. Albers himself taught at Bauhaus, Black Mountain College and then at Yale, and was popular for his classes on color. He discussed widely on the relative nature of color, not a new aspect at all. Many artists have been speaking and working on the same. The color, as Albers observed, was very elusive and changed according to what it was placed next to. What is special about Albers is that he has explored this field of color probably more thoroughly than any living artist till date. He demonstrated the nonsense of relativity of color and its various interactions through his series Homage to the Square, as you can see above, which he painted from 1959 to almost 1965. He has shown here that how deceptive the color could be, how different the colors can look and how identical three colors can be read as 2 or 4 by placing them within each other, next to each other and outside each other. He used a single geometric form that was a square in multiple repetitions to demonstrate his ideas. The art of Albers is that of pure sensation. It is not startling like Brigitte Rillet, black and white illusions, which you can see here, nor extraordinary, but they are significant for his theories and characteristics of op art, now referred to as optical or retinal art, with all elements very much part of his work. Pretty much different to the works of Albers, Victor Vasarely had been creating something like visual stimuli in black and white since 1935. Among these were his compositions with checkerboard, paintings with subjects like tiger and zebra, which gave him easy patterns to create visual illusions, as you can see in these works. All these provided him with ready patterns of strips to explore. In his many experiments, he employed optical ambiguity and disorientation through rhythm and geometric patterns. But his later works, both black and white or colored, and further three-dimensional constructions, express more than what he wanted to say about the effect of optical illusions on the spectator. Vasarely believes that to experience the presence of work of art is more important than to understand it. The intellectual understanding becomes irrelevant in art which has such powerful sensations that can create virtually a physical effect on the viewer. He also said that art should be available to all, discarding its uniqueness. In his own works, he applied the term cinematic art based on the multi-dimensional illusion that it created. The kinetic art implies to the works of art which actually move with the help of mechanics or machineries. Cinetic art refers to the virtual movement which is caused because of the illusions that Vesely could create in his work, which are very obviously visible in his work like the optical spaces painted in 1969. The term cinetic art can also be applied to the works of artists like Yakov Agam, Cruz Diaz and J.R. Soto, who cannot be considered directly as op artists but have been influenced by this style at some part of their artistic career. It is extremely difficult to demarcate the beginning and the end of this movement and style. There have been artists who were inspired by this theory and style and adopted it for a period of time in their careers. But there have been few exponents who are mentioned above who gave their complete life to the experience of op illusions. Others, not less significant but cannot be looked upon under this particular movement only. Op paintings do not take us to any intellectual explorations. They do not really follow any particular ideologies or lead us to any aesthetical explorations of beauty. They are intense sensual impressions which create an impact, ultimately to remain just an unique experience. Minimalism, as the name suggests, has minimal embellishments, rather as less as possible of creation, process and more of thinking. Inspired by Vladimir Tatlin, the renowned Russian architect, whose idea was to make use of real space and real materials, the artist in 1960s America began using direct material and objects like brick, stone, metal, neon lights and placed them in different formations. The artist worked on knowledge and perception, and thus for them beauty and decoration were hardly significant. They went towards reduction to such minimal extent that they reached a point of no creation in art, but only an experience which could be felt. The minimalists believed that the work of art should be completely conceived by the mind before it was executed. They were almost diverse from the pop art in terms of social reflection and to op art in terms of sheer formal execution. They made essentially cerebral art, created with intricate thought process but with an effect extremely simplified. What they share with pop art is the decline of preceding ideas and the use of ready-made objects. Minimalism speaks and wants to create art which no longer wants to serve any particular purpose, does not illustrate any history, has nothing to do with the object or its representation. In short, to create an art that would be free to be just itself, just a work of art. Vladimir Tatlin, the Russian architect, and his ideas about real space and real material were inspiration to minimalism, as we have seen before. This went on to be a significant idea in 1960s as artists began to use the actual raw material, actual colors in surroundings and real space to present their work of art. Rather, all these itself became art. Minimalism went to such extent to basic means that they created nothing. They presented the direct material for direct experience. The method of creation was such that the outcome was essentially three-dimensional, and thus minimalism becomes the first and foremost sculptural movement in the modern history of art. In 1964, Dan Flavin produced a sculpture called as the Monument for V. Tatlin. It was a simple assembly of neon tubes, a classic minimalistic work of art. Such works make minimalism very difficult for people to appreciate it, as they do not consider neon tubes, styrofoam cubes or fiber bricks as art in any case. All that they see with their eyes is the assembly of things and no evidence of artists having done any work at all. They cannot see anything that is made, anything that is created, and what they see thus cannot relate to art. Minimalism remains thus to be one of the most difficult movements to have happened in terms of spectatorship. Let us discuss the works of some of the artists in this ism. Both Judd and Morris wished to change the interpretations of sculpture, especially Judd. He wanted to create something that was real, unlike painting, which he said was essentially illusionistic and thus not credible at all. Sculpture had physical existence and thus could break away from the spatial hoax. Judd's early works are thus combination of sculpture and painting. Low reliefs made of wood, asphalt pipes, liquitex, etc., which have been painted or placed at particular levels in space. In his more mature phase, he began making fully three-dimensional floor and wall pieces, which were always untitled and thus difficult to date. With these three-dimensional sculptures, he dealt with the object actually occupying space and thus more powerful in depicting actual space. They were no more stand-in, but they were actual reality. He thus called them specific objects. These stacked boxes may appear simple, but successfully achieved Judd's ambition of redefining sculpture. Sculpture here was not modeled, carved, or welded, but was assembled. Sculpture was thus natural as it did not take form, but it had form always and was just placed in space which acquired its own form. There was no joint, no base, no pedestal, so work could not be stacked or dismantled or stored. Thus, Judd's work possess space by themselves. Classic Judds portray extraordinary variety of surfaces and contrasting materials from opaque to transparent. His works are marked by object quality, repetition of form, blankness hinting secrecy, industrial look, stark minimalism, and power of scale. Frank Stella is one of the minimalists who worked with the possibilities of minimalism in two-dimensional space. Stella's black paintings, as they are called so, seem to test the limits of art. They are simply lines on blank surfaces arranged in linear and cross, painted with black enamel straight from the can. They are so basic that they strip away any aspect of technique, form, or color in the work of art. Stella's strips are not symbols, rather they are said to be parts of brush on the canvas that lead to painting. As one can see in the paintings here, the black painting done in 1959 and another one which is titled Marriage of Reason and Squalor, again done in 1959. They show extreme emptiness with no attachment whatsoever with anything at all. These made the spectators completely hostile, making minimalism again beyond appreciation of the spectators. Carl Andre, another of the minimalists, shared studio with Stella and was making vertical sculptures from building timbers by carving and modeling of wood. With Stella's influence, he one day realized that wood was better before he had cut it, and that working on wood did not improve it in any way. In fact, he realized that wood itself was cut, so instead of cutting, he used the material as the cut in the space. He thus began stacking and piling beams from 1961, but eventually reached what is called as his hallmark, arranging horizontally. By placing wood or any other object in space, Carl Andre is basically treating the three-dimensional space as his canvas, where the objects that he places are lines which might be drawn vertically or horizontally. He wished his works to touch the ground. Vertical seemed to be too structural for him, and a lot of work seemed to be done to them. Thus, he began working by placing his objects flat on the ground. As you can see that he achieved this in the work called as Lever, which he presented in 1966. In this first important work, in the style of placing objects horizontally on the ground, he shows classical minimalism. This piece consisted of 137 unjoined commercial fire bricks extended along 34.35 feet. This work still was attached to the wall but the metal pieces that followed after 1967 simply occupied the floor. The most complex of these is one called 37 Pieces of Work, which was made to occupy 36 square feet of Guggenheim Museum's floor. It was composed of 1,296 units, 216 each of aluminium, copper, steel, magnesium and zinc. Andre once claimed that the ideal sculpture is the road, and in this work Andre made something like it, such that you may walk or even ride on it. Art thus, as you can see in this work called 37 Pieces of Work, does not remain something that artist shows the spectator, but something that artist gives an experience of. We thus see the three distinct styles that developed in art around 1960s in America, which are drastic in nature, shocking to some extent, and certainly question our ideas of what art could be and what exactly can we call as beautiful. All three are different solutions to the similar questions that artists faced: consumerization, mass production, industrial materialization, superficial world, and its relationship to the reality that we are living. While pop artists embraced the changing culture and repeated it such that one might get fed up of it, minimalism went to the other extent of negating all the embellishments and taking the spectator to the stark realities of living. All these movements are essentially anti-preceding art movements and want to find novel ways to reach their goal, that of pure expression, and to reach the spectator directly without any illusions.